The morning after my first night in the free apartment, a guard appeared. She was a woman with the build of a warrior, but more slender than Ghislaine, although her chest was just as enormous. I explained my situation clearly and in full. False charges, righteous indignation, children rescued, purely heroic circumstances. She listened to none of it. She carried a bucket of water to my cell and upended it over my head. Freezing cold. I looked like a drowned rat. She glared at me as if I were garbage and said one word: pervert. I was naked, soaking wet, being ravaged with contempt by a beautiful animal-eared older woman. There was something psychologically destructive about it. I invoked my deepest source of comfort. Ah, God, Roxy, grant me your protection. And no, man God, I definitely don't mean you. At least I had fire magic. I used burn in place, a localized warming spell to avoid hypothermia. Day 2. Ruijerd hadn't come. I began constructing an escape plan, more to keep myself occupied than out of genuine intent. My cell had a skylight. A guard who sat still in a warm room would inevitably grow sleepy. I mixed fire and wind into a gentle, warm air current that filled the room like a bath. The guard, the one with the enormous chest and the bucket, drifted off in the early afternoon. I lifted the key from the hook, unlocked the door, and stepped outside. The sight stopped me. An entire settlement built above the trees. Every building sitting in the canopy, connected by bridges and scaffolding running from trunk to trunk. Below, the forest floor was nearly empty, just traces of a field that didn't seem to be in use. People moved across the bridges, fully visible from below, and anyone below was fully visible to those above. I was naked. This was a problem. I calculated routes, identified risks, and considered setting fire to a tree to cause a distraction. Then I thought about what lay beyond the settlement. Forest, no map, and geese, whose voice magic I still had no counter for. 6 hours of running, probably getting lost. I went back inside and locked my own cell. Day 5. I got a roommate. He was tossed in with a kick to the rear and a muttered curse. He rubbed his behind, turned around, and found me in a reclining Buddha pose, stretched out on my side, head propped on one hand, completely naked. "Welcome to life's final destination," I said. He stared at me. He looked like an adventurer, all black clothes, leather protectors at the joints, long sideburns, and a face that was structurally a monkey's face, not metaphorically. He was a demon. His expressions cycled through confusion, disbelief, and something like reluctant recognition. "You're naked, but you act awfully full of yourself." "Hey, newbie, I've been here longer than you. That makes me your elder and the master of this cell. Show some respect." "Yeah." "Your answer should be yes, sir." "Yes, sir." I assigned him the title of newbie on the spot, which he accepted with the resigned compliance of someone who had run out of good options. His name was Geese. He'd been arrested for trying to swindle the Doldia with loaded dice. When I asked what else he could do besides swindle, he said he could do anything. When I asked if he could take on 100 women at once, he said 1 was plenty, 2 at the most. A realistic man. I commandeered his vest. He handed it over without much resistance. "I've been going freestyle for days," I explained. "For the first time in a while, I feel like a person again." He reminded me a little of Paul. Sarcastic, seemingly useless, but probably actually decent at looking out for people. On day 7, I discovered his vest was infested with fleas. "I haven't washed it in a while," he admitted. I peeled it off and flung it. It shed insects as it flew. I incinerated them all with my air magic. That was when Geese noticed for the first time that I'd been using magic without chanting for a week. Without an incantation. That really is incredible. The flea bites were all over my back. Every single one on the one part of my body my hands couldn't reach. "Newbie, come over here and scratch my back." Yeah. He was extraordinarily good at this. He moved to my shoulders. I instinctively straightened up. He found muscles I hadn't known were tense. "Ooh, you're really good. A little lower. Right there. Something felt off. I identified it. The guard hadn't brought the noon meal, and there was noise outside. Not ordinary noise. Then Geese mentioned it was also a bit smoky. A thin veil of grey had filtered in through the skylight. I had him lift me up. I looked out. The forest was burning. We were out of the cell in approximately 60 seconds. Using a copy of the key I had made during the first escape rehearsal. Not stealing, just preparation. A wall of hot air hit us outside. Trees were coming down. The houses in the canopy were burning. We found a small cat-eared child stumbling through the smoke, coughing, unable to see. I flung a tree clear with wind magic and caught the child. Light burns, eye irritation. I healed both. Then I looked at what was actually happening in the village. Beast folk were running and screaming. Human fighters in battle gear were chasing them. Men were dragging children by their hair. Warriors who tried to intervene were being cut down. Women were being taken. "Which side are you going to help?" Geese asked. I ran through the logic. The humans were almost certainly working with slave traders or smugglers. We had technically worked with smugglers. We had also technically massacred their entire base of operations, so I considered that settled. The beast folk, on the other hand, had imprisoned me for a week on false charges, stripped me naked, dumped freezing water on me, and left me in a cell with a flea-infested vest. And yet... "The beast folk," I said. "Ha ha! Now you're talking." Geese lifted a sword off the nearest dead body and took a stance, looking mostly decorative but earnest. I raised both hands toward the sky and began building a squall. I compressed the mana steadily, forming clouds, expanding them without releasing a drop. Nobody noticed me. The smoke covered everything. When the clouds were sufficient, I let go. Rain came down like a waterfall. In seconds, the fires began to die. The smoke thinned. Beast folk raised their faces and inhaled. A human warrior sprinted at me. I put a quagmire under his feet and followed with a stone cannon. Another appeared. Same treatment. A beastman with a dog's tail appeared from the other direction, sword already drawn, decapitating the nearest human with a single clean stroke. "I don't know who you are, but thank you for the help. Got it," I replied, in beast god tongue. He looked briefly surprised. Then he howled, gathering his scattered warriors, and the beast folk pushed back. We entered the forest in pursuit of the children who'd been taken. At some point, a warrior let me ride on his back because I was too slow on foot. I became, functionally, a shoulder-mounted stone cannon. We recovered child after child, and then found the last one. A bearded man had the child under his arm and his sword at the child's throat. I recognized the face immediately. Gallus, the man who had arranged our passage across the sea. He explained, conversationally, that this had been his plan from the beginning. He had used us to clean out his rivals. Our job freeing the children in that warehouse had been sabotage of a competing faction within his own organization. The Doldia warriors had been drawn to Zant port by a separate crisis he'd also engineered, tipping them off to a ship carrying kidnapped children, then leaking Ruijerd's involvement so the standoff between the beast folk and the port officials would tie everyone up for days. The Doldia village, left short-handed, was the real target. Gallus wanted the sacred beast. The beastfolk children of Doldia blood sold exceptionally well to a certain perverted noble family in Asura with very specific tastes. The family name started with G, and I had spent a year working for their granddaughter's safety. "Did you know, Kennel Master? Doldia brats sell at an exceptionally high price." I told him I wasn't the Kennel Master. I was Ruijerd of the Superd, and Ruijerd never forgave those who sold children as slaves. The words sounded more heroic than my current state of dress really justified, but I committed to them. Negotiations failed. 3 beastfolk warriors moved to surround him. Gallus, without visible effort, used the child as a projectile to disrupt one warrior's movement, killed 2 with a longsword and a hidden short sword in the span of seconds, and had the third, Gimbal, their leader, skewered before the man could free his arms. Clean, precise, and over before I could cast anything. North God style, Geese said quietly, and a Topher style, North St. Gallus the Cleaner. I had heard Paul disparage the North God style at length. Now I understood. A fighting style with battle tactics built around using hostages was genuinely disgraceful. He should fight properly. I expressed these feelings internally. He took the child back and faced me with the expression of someone who had already won. 2 sacred beast jumped from the bushes and sank its teeth into his sword hand. In the opening that created, I put a shockwave between Gallus and the hostage and separated them. Gallus, furious, accused me of setting my dogs on people. The rumors apparently said this was classic dead-end behavior. I considered clarifying that I had not set the dog on him, that the dog had acted independently, and that I was actually trying to help him right before it bit him. I decided this was not the moment. Geese positioned himself slightly in front of me, sword raised, looking like he expected to die. The sacred beast crouched at my side. Gallus came at me. I could see his attacks through the eye of foresight. Faster than Eris, different rhythm. He sliced at my abdomen, swept back, changed sword hands, twisted, leaped. The short sword came from above and drove through the top of my foot. He'd thrown it with his foot. A blade concealed in his boot, flung like a projectile. I could see into the future and had absolutely not seen that coming. I had backed myself somehow into the spot where the beastfolk warriors had died. He'd maneuvered me there deliberately, a spare blade on the ground, his to recover. "It's over, Kennel Master." Something flew over my head. A black bag. Geese's voice behind me. "North God style original. Crying bomb." Gallus moved to cut it, then hesitated and covered his face with both arms instead. Apparently a trained reflex among North God style practitioners in response to that specific name, a well-documented psychological response to a very specific threat. The bag exploded ash against his face, an opening of about half a second. I channeled everything into both hands and detonated a fiery explosion in the space between us. My body flew backward. My consciousness blinked out briefly. I came back and stood. The knife had been wrenched from my foot by the impact. My toes were intact. Gallus was on the ground, face up, not moving. "Woohoo! We did it!" Geese had his fist in the air. The sacred beast caught Gallus's back, dropped sword in its mouth, returned to me, and wagged its tail vigorously. I patted it on the head and told it we would play frisbee another time. The standoff between the beastfolk warriors and Zant port officials had lasted a week, as it turned out. Ruijerd had attacked the smuggler's ship himself, using the crystal on his forehead to find it, and pulled 50 children out of its hold. Not 5, 50. The port officials, some of whom had taken bribes to pretend nothing had happened, were now trying to punish the beastfolk for stopping the kidnapping on their own shores. Beastfolk warriors came and stood at the city entrance in a standoff with the garrison. Zant Port backed down and paid compensation. The whole process took a week. During that week, Eris had stationed herself with the rescued children, apparently wearing a very large grin about it. That was her grey rat blood. That was why I had been left in the cell for 7 days. We were welcomed back to the Doldia village as heroes. Geese apologized officially. Beastfolk kowtow by lying face up with their stomach exposed, which I initially thought was mockery, and then understood was genuine when everyone in the room was clearly serious about it. I accepted. His six-pack was unnecessarily impressive, and I chose not to dwell on it. Eris did not accept. She had been told what happened to me during those 7 days. The cold water, the naked cell, all of it, and she delivered a boreas punch into Guy's exposed belly, then poured water over his head and watched him look like a drowned rat. "Now we're even," she said. She never failed to impress me. We were invited to spend the rainy season in the village, and the timing of the 3-month deluge made refusing impractical. We settled into an empty house. I was given food regardless of contribution, because we were officially heroes of the Great Forest. Things fell into a rhythm. I learned early on that I could make the guard, Laklana, I eventually learned her name, bring me seconds by complimenting the food. She wouldn't speak to me, but she'd flick her tail and refill the bowl. The food was genuinely excellent. Rich land, fresh ingredients, light seasoning, a revelation after a year on the demon continent. I tried to learn the Doldia's voice magic from Gustav. He demonstrated it patiently, multiple times. The magic manipulated sound through the unique vocal cords of their tribe, and no matter how I channeled mana into my voice, the best I achieved was making someone flinch briefly. Clearly not built for my anatomy. When Gustav learned I used voiceless casting, he was surprised. "Do magic schools teach that now?" "My master taught me," I said, and praised Roxy for no particular reason, to no particular audience. "And where is your master from?" "The Migard tribe. She's probably at the Academy of Magic now." I mentioned I planned to go there too, and Gustav looked impressed. That felt good. Ruijerd and Gustav discovered they were kindred spirits in the most literal possible way, 2 old warriors who had survived things no one else remembered, trading war stories over drinks in the evening. Their conversations were packed with gore and heavily embellished, like listening to retired bikers compare scars. The difference was that whatever Ruijerd and Gustav described had almost certainly actually happened. Warriors these days are a complete disgrace, Ruijerd said. Feeble and weak, Gustav agreed. Men in my youth were tough and strong. Two elderly legends, entirely comfortable in each other's company, lecturing the heir about the inadequacy of the current generation. The camaraderie of old men was apparently universal across worlds. During one of these evenings, the conversation turned to me. Gustav said Geese lacked judgment, and that if he had assessed the situation better, Rudeus wouldn't have spent a week naked in a cell. Ruijerd disagreed. He said I was a warrior, I had let my guard down in enemy territory, and it was my own fault for being caught. If I had taken things seriously, I could have handled guys myself. That hurt. It was also entirely accurate. I had been careless, and he had trusted me to handle it. A warrior who gets captured because they let their guard down has only themselves to blame. I filed this under lessons learned. When Eris showed the others her ring and mentioned Ghislaine's name, Guy's face clenched. He spoke with the bitterness of an older brother who had been significantly weaker than his younger sister, which was, apparently, the core of the problem. He called her a stain on the tribe. He said the ring had been given by their mother to stop Ghislaine going berserk without reason, and it had never worked. A destructive good-for-nothing. I was trying to find a way to put this diplomatically when Eris cut me off. "Shut up! What do you even know about Ghislaine?" She bellowed it loud enough to startle the whole room. Then her voice cracked. Her hands balled into fists. She was trembling, not with the violence I expected, but with the effort of holding it back, tears welling in her eyes. "Ghislaine is amazing. Amazingly amazing. If you call for her, she comes immediately. She's super fast and super strong. She couldn't punch him here." That was the thing she'd understood, even through the anger. If she swung here, Geese could just say they were two of a kind. So she stood there with clenched fists and shaking shoulders, defending someone who wasn't even present. "You're not someone who can just hick." I put my arm around her shoulders. "Let's stop this here." She looked at me like I'd betrayed her. "Do you hate Ghislaine?" "No. I like her. The person we know and the person they know share a name, but she's a different person now." Eris didn't seem satisfied, but some of the tension went out of her. Geese was quiet for a long moment. "Is Ghislaine really respected?" "I respect her," I said. "At the very least." He asked me, a week later, emerging from obvious contemplation, "How did you teach Ghislaine to read?" He couldn't picture it, he said. I told him the story, her struggling to keep up, her determination, her eventual success, and watched the contempt in his face slowly give way to something more complicated. When I mentioned Eris teaching Ghislaine and Ghislaine learning magic, he laughed and said that was a joke. Eris insisted it was true, talking about it at length to anyone who would listen, including at one point from inside the wooden box where I had been hiding behind the changing room. Geese knocked on the box. "Master Rudeus, I can smell the sexual arousal on you." I tried claiming it was a nearby beastfolk girl expressing excitement, but beastfolk have extraordinary noses, and he wasn't fooled. He said he was grateful for what I'd done. He was apologetic for the cell, but if I put my hand on his daughter, it would be a completely different story. He would throw the box into the floodwaters. "Restrain yourself a little." "Yes, sir." Fair enough. The sacred beast had developed a habit of finding me during its daily walk time. It lived in the restricted area near the sacred tree, but once a day it roamed the village freely, and wherever I was seemed to be its preferred destination. Laklana would come to retrieve it and apologize, each visit, for the incident with the cold water, more than was necessary, and her apologetic posture triggered something in my inner monologue that I will not be documenting here. During one of these visits, she started to ask if perhaps I was the hero destined to travel with the sacred beast. The sacred beast immediately barked. "The sacred beast said you're not the one," Laklana translated. "I figured as much. But it's grateful to you." She paused. "It was the sacred beast who asked us to give you especially good food during your imprisonment." That was interesting. Good food as gratitude. Absolutely a dog solution to the problem of having let someone get thrown in jail. I mentioned that releasing me from the cell would also have been an option. The sacred beast asked what a cell was, apparently having no idea, I explained. It responded that it was also locked up. A fair point. I gave up on reparations. During the quieter weeks, I made a figurine, Ruijerd, rendered in ash-grey stone without the green hair that caused everyone to panic. The superd had become faceless boogeymen in the popular imagination. A stone figure couldn't fix that, but it was something to do with my hands while the rain continued. On one occasion, I tried to teach the sacred beast to shake. Laklana found out. She was incredibly pissed. I will not elaborate further. 1 month in, I noticed Eris teaching language. Her teaching human tongue to Minotona and Tersina, a cat-eared girl and a well-developed dog-eared girl respectively, both around Eris' age, both fast friends with her now. This was Eris' first experience of same-age friendship that didn't involve combat or authority. I watched from a distance, red hair, cat ears, dog ears, all 3 of them talking and laughing. I had the sense to not barge in. 3 months passed. The rain stopped. The evening before we left, Eris and Minotona had a fight. Minotona had tried to convince Eris to stay, couldn't accept the refusal, and eventually threw the first punch, which takes real courage against someone who can keep pace with Ruijerd. Eris won without particular effort. She would always win. But she pulled her punches, which she had never done before. When I asked if she'd held back, she turned away. Of course. Normally you'd have been meaner. Yeah, well, she's my friend. She looked ashamed saying it. 14 years old and learning that friendship had different rules than combat. 3 months of actually having people her own age had done something to her that I hadn't noticed until now. Make up with her before we leave, I said. Don't want to. Still a child. But less so than before.